Yeah, I'm literally watching my wife and 2 daughters walk out on this icy path this morning. I'm looking out my window. I know it's what's her name? Tammy, what's her last? Sullenberg? Do you know who I'm talking about? She does the One Inside podcast.
Yeah.
She opens up her podcast with, what are you looking outside right now? Now you're the first, so I'm looking out, not to rob her. I'm just give her name acknowledgement.
A shout out.
Yeah, exactly. But my attention was caught because my girls are going off to school. This is before hitting record, saying that this is the first morning interview. And it's not morning where you are, Kylie. You're in Thailand.
I am in Bangkok, Thailand right now.
Bangkok, Thailand. And so
I look out my window, it's skyscrapers.
Skyscrapers on a nighttime sky.
Yes, nighttime sky, lots of lights on top of the skyscrapers. Yeah.
So you're and you refer to yourself as a digital nomad, and I do want to get sort of the background autobiography. Tell me about your life. How did you get into this field? When did you? I've always been envious of people who are like, I always knew I wanted to be a dentist when I was 6 years old or whatever, right? I'm like, I struggled for so long, right? But so we'll get there. But just opening it up. How long have you been going to Thailand? Because my understanding is this is not the first rodeo. You go there in the winters, or?
Yeah, actually, my first time to Thailand was when I was 15 years old. So I was already kind of living on my own a little bit in like grade 10. And I went to a new school, and they were like, over the PA, the first day was like, who would like to go live in another country? And I like wandered down there, filled out the paperwork, handed it in, and they're like, you're accepted. And I was like, called my parents. I was like, can I go to another country? Like, what? No. And then I was staying with a family friend, and he heard me say this and then call my parents. I was like, I'll pay for Kylie to go. And I ended up going to Thailand for a year as a Rotary exchange student.
Wow.
And that was life-changing. I grew up in a community where there was about 8 kids in my grad school. From grade 4 to grade 12, there was 200 people in the town altogether. So coming to Thailand was just like, and to be around people that were so academic. Like, I was very academic, but I grew up in a very hippie small town community in British Columbia where like nobody was academic. Everybody was into like partying for way too young of an age. And so to go somewhere where I was like, oh my God, these are my people. Like, this is amazing to be with kids that have, parents that just, just such a different world. It was a completely different world, not just Thailand, but to be in the Rotary world with peers that were kind of similar to me.
Right. I mean, that's mind blowing to just hear that coming over the announcements in the morning, be like, so I'm game. Like, was there, so we're both IFS professionals, and most of the audience is well informed, or won't need any kind of disclaimer or definition of the model or anything like that. So was there any part of you that was like, what the fuck are you doing, Kylie? Like, what are you, or did you feel most of the geese were flying in the same direction?
Yeah. I feel like, as you started, those people that just know what they're going to do, I've been really blessed. I feel like in my life that way, there's this part of me that is always knows exactly what I'm going to be doing. Like when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, I knew I was going to become a counselor. Like that was it. So like I've always and when I decide something, it just feels like this intuitive hunch, and it's like, here we go. And it's just like, there's no struggle.
So right, I call that the gift of clarity, because it's a huge gift, right? Absent all the energy leakage that comes from the internal senators debating should we, shouldn't we? So that's amazing. That's amazing. And that your parents were supportive of that. You're like, I've already filled out the paperwork. They're like, wait, what?
I'm like, I'm accepted. Like, this is happening. You need to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So okay, so you knew at a very early age, and so that pretty much set the track in your educational career, or in your so when you were in Thailand, you knew, all right, I'm here to it's like, that's what's it called, the pilgrimage, like proverbial like leave your community out into the unknown and adventure. You ticked that off at age 15.
Yeah.
So are there any
Yeah.
memorable, impressionable like experiences the first time you went into another culture? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think again, growing up where I grew up, and then I grew up with a lot of trauma as well, younger, and then coming
Mm.
here, I got to feel like me. It was like, it was like freedom, and it
Right.
was, yeah, it was like you grow up in a really small community sometimes, and people put a lot of projections on top of you, and you don't get to choose your friends because there's only like eight
Yeah.
people. So like, who are you gonna, so it's really hard to see yourself quite clearly because the people that you're around aren't the people that you might choose to be around. Like, I love people that I grew up with, but you learn to get along with a lot of people. So when I came here, I got to choose it. And
Right.
it was like, even though there was only a couple people, we already had so many similarities. And so the reflection back to me of who I was, I think that's the one thing I loved traveling from a young age, is that I got to see myself through other people's eyes that weren't from where I came from.
Right.
And that really helped me grow. And with the school I went to in Canada was a joke. Like, I never had a grammar class in my life. Like, it was we would sing in, like, they taught us Japanese for a couple classes. We would sing in circles the songs that the teachers wrote. And so
This was a public school?
Yes, this is a public school. And so, yeah, I was convinced most of my life that I only got A's because teachers liked me. But so coming here again, like, I was an academic person. I got to be around these people, and Thailand's amazing. People are so friendly here. Everybody's smiling. It's a Buddhist culture, so there's not the same like materialism and the same like competitiveness that's in like a Western world. So it was just like, it was really relaxing. Like, I felt very safe here. There was no like threat, I guess.
You're unintentionally doing a fabulous job promoting this as the next family trip. I mean, we got to go to Jamaica. My wife's grandmother is getting there in age, but these girls, especially, we've been talking about even like just floating, fantasizing about what would it be like to pull the girls out of school and just travel. I mean, it's like the gap year happens when they're in their single digits, rather than like after high school, right? Yeah, I've never been to Thailand, and I would love. I've been to Asia, but never Thailand. And if I were to go, I would first want to be like, okay, so can I go? Like, can I see a Thai boxing fight? I want to see like Muay Thai boxing, and I would want to, compare the Silver Spring Thai food here to like the authentic, But I've heard about not elephant rides, but just being with elephants, whether it's like giving them a bath or whatever, right? Like having that. But I'm curious for our listeners, if anyone has been on the fence about like, they're experiencing what you're saying to me in a similar way, like, oh, this sounds like, I would want to go. What are some things that come to mind? You said the culture is really safe. It's not materialist. But what else comes to mind? What else makes Thailand unique, or that you've enjoyed?
Yeah.
And by the way, let me just sub question here. How many times have you gone?
I don't know. I think like 4 or 5 times, maybe more. And I come for like a couple months at a time. Like, I spent 6 months here during COVID. Just, they kept the borders open here. They just did it in a really safe way. It was a lot of paperwork I had to go through to get here, but yeah. And a big reason I come now too, like, it does feel like home, but I don't like the cold. I can handle the cold, but cold in the dark shut me down in my parts. And so if I come here in the summer, it's like, I feel like, in the nicest way possible, I'm tricking my system into being even more productive. But there's so much self-care. Like, I can go get a Thai massage for $7, and like, you don't cook because it's cheaper to get food delivered to you or to go out to eat than it would be to buy groceries. I'm staying in a condo this time, so I have to do my own cleaning, but sometimes I stay in a hotel, which means somebody comes and makes your bed and cleans your room every day. So like the self-care, I get like vitamin IVs here. I don't know if you've heard of that. They're like one of my favorite things. Here they're like $30. So I'm just like, I need to stop. Like I'm cutting myself off of vitamin IVs right now because I'm like, I feel tired. Maybe I'll just go get a massage and IV. And like the last time they're like, you need to use your other arm now. I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, just to taking care of myself. Just being here. If anyone's thinking about being like a digital nomad or like taking time, like Thailand has everything you could possibly want and more.
Well, you're selling me hard here. It's great. Not that that's your agenda at all.
I know. I wish I could get like so many things I sell. I'm like, I'm not getting anything from this. Like I wish.
Yeah. Wait, so for people who don't know what a digital nomad is, or so I'm curious. First of all, what is a digital nomad, and where else have you explored?
Yeah, so like a digital nomad to me is like traveling and working online, like having that freedom to move around. And so for the last couple of years, I've really like stayed true to that. Like I often just come to like Thailand. Actually, I'm going to Bali next month too. I'll go to Bali. I wouldn't have gone there except for my friends are going to be there, so I'm gonna go there. And the only reason I love Bali, except for the chances of you getting really sick with Bali belly are quite high.
What's
and Bali belly is a unique, it feels like food poisoning, but it's not. It's almost like you've just gotten exposed to like bacteria or E. coli. Like your body can only handle a certain amount, and then it sets you over the edge. And so you'll associate it with the last thing that you ate, but I don't really think it is that. It's just like the water is really bad there. So if you're like showering and you're in the pool and it's just a very unique sickness that you'll get.
Interesting. My wife and I honeymooned in Bali, and we didn't get the Bali belly. Thankfully.
Good. That's good. Yeah. I'm usually fine sometimes for about 3 weeks, and then I've always stayed for 2 months, and then that's when my system like starts to like turn over. But otherwise I love Bali. Like it's beautiful there as well.
So
and then go ahead.
What makes it so? I understand nomad is to travel, but say more about the digital component.
Yeah, because you can work online.
Yeah.
Like
being a remote worker.
A remote worker. Yeah. And then being able to travel.
And where else have you gone?
Honestly, this is my most common rotation is Thailand to Bali. Last year I went to Tulum for a couple months in Mexico, and I will not ever do that again. I really made me appreciate and love Thailand even more.
What happened in Tulum?
Tulum is the most expensive place that I've ever been, for sure. Like more expensive than the States, more expensive than Vegas. Like, you want a $10 cab ride, it's like $100 US or like $60 US, like $30 margaritas. Like it's like, what? And and you got to worry, like I love the safety piece of being in Thailand. In Mexico, I don't feel safe there. Like I don't feel safe with the cops. In Thailand, I feel very safe with the police. There was a shooting while I was there, just in broad daylight at the beach, where a tourist was shot. And so like those things I just don't. I was like, no, thank you. I'm good. But, and also recognizing too, Thailand is one of the only places that hasn't been colonized. And when I was in Mexico, I was quite aware that like people only speak Spanish here because they were colonized. And I think there's something different about a place that's been colonized versus a place that has not. And it's hard to put words to it, but I can feel the difference in my nervous system.
Yeah. Wow. I never appreciated that before. I thank you for naming that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I feel a push to come to like your biography and your, especially knowing what you are the personality profile that I was envious of like having the clarity and knowing. And so how did that guide your decision of going into grad school or like going through the steps? Like how did you, or even which track to take, right? Like counselor versus psychologist, like what? So just walk our listeners and myself through that.
Yeah, well, originally thought it was like psychologist, but counselor is the steps through that. And a lot of my drive was I just had so much childhood trauma that I was like, honestly, the part was like, we're going to have to become a psychologist to figure this out. Like, this is going to be the only way out is we need to become the expert. And, you know, when I got to my early 20s, I tried, like as soon as I graduated, I went into my BA for psychology, but like tried to reach out to counselors. And I saw counselors when I was younger, which caused more trauma. And so I was like, it was nice that I wanted to go into the field, but a big push was the people I was meeting in the field were not meeting me. And I didn't feel like they could help, but my system held a lot of hope that there would be an answer in the research, in doing it, that I'd be able to find what I was looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you know, for those not familiar, that's not an uncommon pull to the field at the unconscious level, right? There's, I remember I went to it was the Psychotherapy Networker every year that's held in DC. And there was a presenter, I won't say the name, but I found it striking that in their presentation, they were talking about like one of the reasons why I can be a counselor is because I never had any trauma. And I was like that there's a story about someone who's never had trauma, but I don't know if that story has ever taken place on Earth. Or like I guess the Buddha, right? In the Prince Gautama, he was completely bubble wrapped and protected. But I was just thinking, everyone's on their own journey, but to so many, they're the wounded healer, like the. I remember when I wrote my statement of purpose to get into grad school, I was also like the story was like, well, I came from a really secure and loving family and I want to give back. And, you know, and of course that's like true in a sense. And in many ways, deep down in the dark basement of the psyche and all of the repression, it's like, oh yeah, no, there's a whole, like, I should probably untangle lots of stuff before taking heavy amounts of psychedelics, because there's probably going to be dragons and monsters and all that stuff, you know? But yeah, so I very much appreciate what you're saying in terms of you were called to say, like, this is how I'm going to sort myself out and heal and integrate. And good on, I have a lot of admiration for the hope as well that your system had. That's so crucial, as you well know. So, okay, so you thought psychologist. And so where did you end up going to grad school?
I actually went to City University of Seattle, which is a U.S. university, but they have a campus in Vancouver, downtown. And so I went there. It's a private university. So getting into your master's there's very few schools here in Canada that have that. And then maybe they accept like 10, 15 students a year versus going to a private school. So I don't think they advertise themselves as like a narrative based grad school, but they kind of are. So they're a lot more like open. The person who had started it because he like bought the power most of his life and then realized he could fight it a lot better if he opened up a school. So I really resonated with him. You know, I think I had an interview with him to get into the school and he was wearing like a tie-dye shirt. And so like, I was like, yeah, I can come here. And he like told me on the spot, he's like, I don't want you to worry about it. You can come. I was like, thanks. And so that school actually, just before I got in, like just as I entered grad school, that's when I came across IFS. Actually, I was on a walk, a random podcast came on. Richard Swords talking about "You Are the One You've Been Waiting For," and my whole body lit up. I was like, "Oh, this is it! Like this is the thing! Like this is it!" And then, luckily, because my school was flexible, they didn't know what IFS was, but because they were open, they let me do all of my papers and presentations on IFS.
Oh, I have parts that are so jealous or envious right now. I'm like, oh, Kylie, that's so awesome. By the way, do you
Yeah.
remember the podcast?
Yeah, it was the Relationship Alive podcast, and it was him interviewing Richard Swartz.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one,
Mhm.
but that's I'm so
Mhm.
grateful that that you. How did you find out about that podcast? You said it was random.
Honestly, I was just walking and it just came on, and I was just like, oh, like this is so cool. Like it felt very like serendipitous. I was actually becoming a coach at the time. I was because I knew I always wanted to be a counselor. I took a 3-year coaching program. And that was really random too. I just met this woman in Whistler, and she's like, I'm a coach of a program, you should take it. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I was doing that. So then I instantly just like, I couldn't help but share IFS with everybody. I was like, there's parts, like, did you know, and I was just like telling all of my clients, like reading the books. And it took a bit. I took like the IFS Institute, actually like a pilot coaching program back in the day. I don't know, probably 2007, or no, not 2007. Sorry, 2000. That's way too early. That's when I graduated. About 7 years ago, or 8 years ago now, maybe. And so I took that because I couldn't get into a level 1, just seemed expensive, and it was when they only had them in person. And so as soon as COVID hit, I signed up. I was like one of the first like online cohorts to get in. But I was grateful throughout my master's that, and I'm presenting to some of they're like the students, they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about, but you're like so excited about it.
Yeah,
like,
the passion and enthusiasm.
Yeah, they're like, okay, Kylie. Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, I
Yeah.
know, I mean, as I'm sure many IFS professionals, like when you were saying this is so cool, did you know there's parts like that? I call it like my like evangelist who can get rather obnoxious according to the judge or the critic. It's like there's a difference when the energy is like, just like with anything else, if someone's like really passionate and they're like not allowing the other person any space to like contribute or talk, and so that part of me is still I think carrying a lot of the like the it's like a mother's need. It's like, I just need to hug you and kiss you. It's like, yeah, but there is a universe in which that's too much. It's like, okay, so where do we need to, like, do you need a puppy? Like, where do you need to get the love out? How do you need to wring that washcloth out? And my wife is like, you need a TED talk. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. She's like, you really do, like, but I know what you mean. Just the mission or the purpose of like, how can we help alleviate suffering through this lens? And what's really cool is the wisdom tradition, anthropological, religious, comparative religious, like going back and looking at all of what humanity has been trying to point to through the lens of multiplicity, and through the weirder stuff that the IFS world. Just because you are like, hey, did you know Inside Out, that Disney Pixar movie, is like actually like there's more truth to that than you might want to like imagine. Like, there's the kind of domesticated IFS, which is we'll just talk about human parts, and then there's that as a bridge or pathway towards some of the wilder, weirder stuff that non-IFS professionals are like, oh yeah, we know about this stuff too. We just didn't take the IFS toll road to get there, So I'm curious, when in what timeline in your autobiography did you start to get interested in the more esoteric or the wisdom traditions or the things that are not explicitly taught in a level 1, for example?
Yeah, well, when I was timelines, you look back, it's hard, but I was really struggling. I think I must have been like maybe 25, 26, going through like a bad breakup. And you know, my partner at the time had always talked about ayahuasca and like was researching it and all that stuff. And we like broke up for a week and I was really struggling. And my friends like, you should just go to Peru and do ayahuasca. Like I was just there at this retreat. You should go. So I just went. We were like broken up for a week and then we got back together and I was like, oh, by the way, in that week, I'm going to go to Peru and do ayahuasca, that thing that you've been studying. That I'm like, wow, that's stupid. Like, I'm not interested at all. I'm going to do that. And that was really an amazing trip. It was a tough trip. It was something that I think I needed, but it was just like it really opened me up. And I was like, there's got to be another way to get here, to get to these beings in this place, that you don't have to like go into the rainforest and like just like shake your system up so aggressively. And it's like I can like see all the foreshadowing, I think, in my life into like IFS. And to me, IFS takes, I have lots of clients that are like, after a session like that was like an ayahuasca trip. What we just did. And I'm like, yeah, and we can go there. This place exists. And so IFS to me, I've always been really curious about like the more spiritual side. I think a lot of like how I've known what I'm always going to be doing has been really led by like guides and something higher than me. And it was hard too, because I grew up in a community that was very like, it's the most like hippie place in Canada, and watching people do the border of like spiritual and psychosis a little bit, or like that ungrounded spiritual nature kind of kept me away from it for a little while. But as I healed, I realized where I'm missing something. Like I'm missing the magic. I'm missing, there's something that I'm missing. And so really started kind of leaning more into, and it happens, I work a lot with ancestral stuff. I work a lot with unattached burdens. To me, IFS is going to the same place often that ayahuasca takes you.
Yes. Okay. So that explains it, right? The in your 20s, your mid 20s, you it's funny. You were saying that you were the one, that your partner before the breakup, you were the one that was like, I'm not really interested in this stuff. Okay.
and then all the books, like spiritual, like the spirit molecule, like all the like things, and like Alex Gray and all this stuff, and I was just like, like what?
Yeah, it's wild. I remember a buddy of mine told me about. We were at a bar in DC, and my other buddy was going to, I don't know, Argentina or Barcelona or somewhere, and it was like a going away party, and it's like I should have been there hanging out with my buddy who was leaving, but I was so enthralled by the conversation I was having with Nima over at the bar that like I was pretty much hanging out with him the whole night. And he was telling me about Rick Strassman and the spirit molecule, and he was kind of saying like, yeah, Robin, like this, he's like, this, it takes away your fear of death. He's like, if that kitchen went on fire and everything went like, I'm okay. Like, and I was like, that's fascinating. Right? My whole ego complex was like, so that's worth looking into, you know. Anyway, I digress. So after that experience in the ayahuasca trip, how were you? What it was Peru, and how big was how many people were there at the ceremony?
Yeah, it was Peru. And actually this, my timeline's clicking. This was just before I went to do my master's. I was either going to move to Portugal, or I was gonna, with that person I was with, or I was gonna go to school. And so it became very clear, like, you are going to school in that trip. And the retreat center that I went to, I would not recommend anybody ever go to. Yeah, there was about, I think, 10 of us. And the shaman who ran it, who owned the land, was actually from Europe and was an ex-multi-millionaire that like found himself through ayahuasca and then opened up this retreat center. And I think some people, he had good teachings, but also sometimes when people get that much power and control, it gets a little bit twisted. But then the actual ceremony was really beautiful. He had Shipibo shamans that he allowed to live on like his land, and they didn't speak English or anything like that. They just really lived in the forest with ayahuasca. And so there was 5 of them, and we did it under the full moon in the rainforest, and they sang the most beautiful Icaros. And I felt so held by them. through that. It was really amazing what they did. So that piece of it, like those shamans were amazing. The person who ran the retreat, though, we would sit with him in a room for about 10, 14 hours a day. Everybody told their life story. And then when you did the ayahuasca, he would give you a question. It was the question that your subconscious had hidden from you, but it was the one that you needed for a breakthrough. And so my question that blew me away was, what is truth to a little girl? And that's probably going to be like the title of my memoir if I write that one day. And that is where I experienced like an ego death. That was like very, very intense. I thought I died in the rainforest and was never coming back. But what he would, after the trip though, he wouldn't let me process it. Like it was so intense, and he kicked most of the people out of the retreat. He ended up kicking me out too. So he would like listen to your story, find your biggest trauma, and then call you on it. And then if you didn't agree with him, you got kicked out.
Well, that's the opposite of being held, right?
Yes. So I was like, thank God I have my like kind of my background. But then at the same time, it's like he was promising people complete liberation. So then if you fight with him or you like disagree, but I watched him kick so many people out that just like came across the world that had like just he's really good for people that don't have really intense traumas. That just, not that a rape trauma, but like have a really good sense of self still, and worth, that he could call those people and it was fine. But for other people where, I think one person ended up going home and dying right after. And it was, so I don't recommend that place. That was pretty brutal, but the medicine itself, I felt very helped with, and those Shipibo shamans.
I'm curious about the full moon, what the significance or importance of that.
They didn't really talk about it other than it was beautiful. It was like, I'm sure there was a significance to it, but it was a very beautiful ceremony. And they said sometimes even like the animals would come down to the ceremony. They said they had like snakes go and like circle around and then like leave. It was a very cool, very sacred experience.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I also planted a flag here when you talked about unattached burdens, and that's something that the audience might have been like, what? So because that, again, that's, even though they teach that in level 3s, right?
You know what's interesting is like, that's one of the reasons I became an Akashic Records coach, is because like I wanted to understand the more spiritual side of IFS before I got to a level 3. So I'm like, I feel like it's going to take forever. And then when I got to my level 3, I was like so excited, but like I'd already studied UB so much. And then it was with Pam Krause, and she's like, I don't like talking about them. So she didn't, but what she did is she gave the floor to everybody who has worked with like Bob and knows, to kind of like talk on it and to like share resources. So I was like, thank God I've gone and like done all of this work and didn't wait for my level 3.
Well, that tracks with what I've heard about just the IFS community, and every trainer obviously has their own unique system and is given some freedom and flexibility with how they want to run the training. There's like basic criteria and guidelines. You got to check these boxes, like core curriculum stuff, but makes sense to me why you'd have a trainer who's like, I'm just not, that's good for them for opening it, to integrate for the group experience, to be like, if anyone else wants to share, like that's kind of the collective wisdom of the group, right?
And honestly, it's such a big topic. They couldn't have caught it anyways, if that makes sense. Like not fully, like they can, like that you really, if it's something you're passionate about, you need to go and study it.
That's right.
And work in it. So I think what she did was perfect, and not everybody's going to resonate with that work. I don't think a lot of people do. And the stuff that she did teach, the stuff that Pam is really good at, is amazing to get to learn that from her. So I find like some trainers have like their thing, and so I absolutely, it's been a pleasure to get to train.
Did you say Pam Krause? Which Pam? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Pam Krause.
Yeah. She's the one with a lot of experience with little kids, right?
I don't if she works with kids. She does a thing that now I do all of the time. I had her as my level 1 too, and I forgot about it, but it's really using the heart to connect with parts and seeing like that, like any openness in your heart for this part. And it's just, if it lands, man, does it land. And it's helped so many of my, especially my self-like parts, that is a way to get to them, because they, like my therapist part, she runs the show in my life. She's not just a I call her a therapist part, but she's really Kylie. And so very hard to get her to unblend. But if I can find openness in my heart, it's like a different way than just like compassion or understanding. There's something I feel physically shift when I can do that versus just the compassion and the understanding.
Right. So compassion and understanding are in some way, I don't want to call them finite because they are limitless, but like they're not the same as something else that's beyond that. That's divine love. Like that's more powerful.
It's like wordless. There's something in it that is just this embodied state, where, and then there is compassion, understanding in it, but sometimes getting to that like embodied self energy feeling, I find she's very good. And if you watch her work, she uses very little words. Like but like the work is just so profound. So she kind of made a comparison of like, some people are, is it mystics and magicians? I think she used, and she's a mystic. And then there's other people I think that would move more like Richard Swartz, that are more the magicians. You can like get in there, use a lot of direct access. Sometimes you're like moving things around, you're doing stuff, and they're like, oh, there's this and there's here, that, versus like a mystic that's just like, it just unfolds. And I think it's just like that mass build of self energy in the room.
So I do want to circle back here to just for people who don't know. So the mind is multiple, made of parts. Disney Pixar Inside Out pop culture reference for everyone. It's funny too, because my girls, I'll use the now, like the control panel. Who's at the control panel? They know sadness is there, and it's beautiful. So unattached burdens, that's not represented in Inside Out, right? Not even implicitly. It's not even, it makes no close. There's no reference. So for just what are unattached burdens for our listeners?
Unattached burdens, there's so many different kinds, but basically it's a part that's not a part of you. And a lot of times, because a lot of them don't have positive intentions for you either. And there's a variety of, I don't like to use the word like maliciousness, maybe with them sometimes, is a lot of times they're much more concerned about their survival. And sometimes it is just about like they've kind of found your system and they're surviving off of your energy in a certain way. And Bob Felkner's done a lot of work on this. He's got a beautiful book called The Others Within Us. And as we know, with IFS, sometimes like our burdens aren't ours, they're legacy, or they've passed down through generations or through families, but our parts are holding that energy. Sometimes though, there's a part that is very much separate from your system. They're also just lost. Before I knew about, I knew about UBs. My friends who were Akashic Records coaches, they worked with them, and shamans work with them. Sometimes, they're known as like entities or, other energies that are attached to you. And a lot of those those professions would just banish them. So if you find something that's like dark energy in your system, you just banish it, or you like push it out into the light. Right.
Throw it overboard into the ocean.
It's out. Yeah.
It's out of your boat. It's no longer on your boat. Yeah.
And I was like, I remember asking my friend, and before I knew about Bob's work, but why are they dark? Like, what happened? Like, what were they ever light? Like, what happened to them? And she's like, I've never asked that or even thought about it, And I could see that as a foreshadowing into the work that I do. And I've had a lot of UBs in my system from when I was quite young. And I've always known, not that I had a language, my system was very good at just like kind of pushing them to the side. until I started hearing Richard Swartz talk about, oh, I think I was listening to him do a video and like kind of talk. He was working with a client or as a consultation, and they're working with an exile, and then this part would just come in and be like super aggressive and like super weird and like, or overly sexual, and it was just like getting in the way. And he's like, oh, sometimes there's just these parts that aren't a part of us. And I was like, what? And I was like, I have that. I just didn't have a language or a way to work with it, so I just kind of would push it to the side. And since I told my therapist a couple of years ago about my experience of one, I have had so many in my system. Like, I think over the last year and a half, I've met more UBs sometimes than I have met any of my new parts. And I have a lot of compassion for them. I love the way that Bob works with them, that they're also just lost. And it's like a compassionate, that we're just helping them. And that if we can choose, they choose to leave. So an issue, one of the things why Pam didn't like talking about UB is people mistakenly think that firefighters, that really, really harsh parts, really harsh inner critics aren't a part of you. Sometimes parts will take in energy of perpetrators because they have the power. And so they do that to protect us. And so there was sometimes with that banishing model of like, oh, you're not a part, get out of here. There's this accidental banishing of a part that's a part of you. And so with Bob's work, though, is we help them remember who they really are, that they are beings of light, and that they need to go back home to where they're missed and where they can be healed and where they can be forgiven. And so they choose to go. And then there's no, you're not banishing a part that's a part of you.
Yeah.
So kind of a long.
No, there's a lot of things I want to say in response to that, but I appreciate you taking this through that. I'm like really grateful for the podcast, because that's how I came across this stuff. Like I remember there have been several guests that I've reached out to, and I was like, whoa, I totally reached out to you not expecting ever to be responded to, let alone that you'll come on the show. And Bob was one of them. And it was right as this is a culmination. His book, The Others Within Us, was a culmination of 10 years of work. And I just luckily was like, he was like, I wanted to interview him about the one he co-authored with Richard Schwartz on Many Minds Oneself, because that was the one that I was nerding out all the wisdom traditions. Oh my gosh, this is cool. Like, I was raised Christian, Episcopalian, but when people are, what religion do you believe? I'm like, all of them where they overlap in the Venn diagram. Like, that's what I believe in.
That one.
And Bob's like, well, that's good. He graciously sent me a copy of that book. But he's like, but I'm coming out with this new book, and we should really talk about that one. And it makes sense why he was so jazzed about that. So he sent me the one with all the grammatical errors, and I was addicted to it. I couldn't put it down.
Amazing.
Right? Yeah. And so that was what informed and this was after being level 1 trained. No, it was before. I think this was before going into the level 1 training. So I remember. Well, I don't need to tell that story. The point is, the awareness of these things. I enjoyed knowing about it. For some reason, it didn't seem strange to me, but I have like intellectual parts that get hung up and preoccupied around determinism and free will. So with Bob, I was like. He's like, these things get to choose whether or not they can't stay. It's like being at a bar. It's like, you don't have to go home, people, but you can't stay here. We're closing the bar, right? It's like they get to choose whether they go to the healing realms and trust that they do have light, that spark of light inside of them, or scurry back into the darkness. And I was like, do they get to choose though? And I was just hung up on free will. And he was like, well, they appear to. He wouldn't get bogged down in that. But yeah, so, and for people who are listening, when they think about entities, or Bob references the spiritists of Brazil, how they're convinced that these are all just lost souls. This is the kind of stuff that, you might encounter in a psychedelic experience. But as you were saying earlier, Kylie, you don't need exogenous plant medicine or anything to get access to this space. And when I was interviewing him again, I think if I go back and listen to that interview, I imagine I will hear like my intellectual part like dominating so much of it, because it's just trying to like map the territory of these things.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, look, if parts have parts, it's all fractal, which means there's innumerable parts, and therefore there's a it's statistically impossible that everyone that we know isn't walking around with these things teeming in the underground that they're just not aware of. And so as you're talking about like learning more about your own system and discovering these beings, I don't want to scare our listeners to say I'll just speak for my belief. It's my belief that this is not an abnormal thing, that you can be completely psychologically healthy and carry a whole bunch of these things, but it's not a big deal if you know how to be compassionate with them, because they seem to be, if we treat them as if they have personhood. And in my view, I don't need that kind of lecture anymore. I'm like, no, I'm fully bought in. It's not acting as if or anything like that. I'm like, no, they are full on beings, and they deserve. I remember having not an argument, but kind of a respectful debate with my mother-in-law. I'm like, Satan himself deserves compassion. Like, no one's exempt. Right? Everyone gets a ticket home. You know what I mean?
Everybody's good.
Everyone. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's hard for you. Were kind of hesitant to use the word malicious or malevolent, but very much these beings. I mean, all of the evil in the world that we turn on the news, all the evil, all that unimaginable atrocities, UB activity, or again, that's IFS's word for them, right?
That's my theory for it. And because we live in this culture that for some reason, especially the West, is denying it, it's just led to so much more like pain. And because there hasn't been a way to work with it, I understand why people might not want to believe that it's real, because the only time that we do see it as real is in really horrible movies that are really scary, and then a system to understand if it's real, but like, what do you do about it? And then, Bob's work is like, oh, there's a solution. So if this is here, it's nothing to be scared about. These are also scared beings, and we can help. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the most important teachings, is the notion of what role does fear play, right? If you're not afraid of them, they lose all power. And that's a hard pitch, because they're really good at scaring you, They
are. And what's interesting is I'm in Bob's consult group right now, and the one UB, I've never come across a UB like this, but in my system was actually scared not to have it. And I had it when I was really young. It came to me in a time when I really didn't have any protection. And it said to me, like, it was in such a dark place for so long. And when it found me, I saw it as good, even this like 5-year-old version of me. And it was like, I'm going to protect you. And it did. It protected me, not in the very best ways, but only in the way that it knew how. And there was big consequences to that. But my 5-year-old like loves that being, like loves it. And I sat with it a couple times before I sat with Bob, because I was like, I'm not afraid of them, but I didn't realize how much, and there was shame around that she was afraid to not have it, and what would be there without it. And they do often come in sometimes when you're young and there's trauma, and they can offer protection. And a lot of the people, like in the people I've worked with, they want them gone. This is the first time in my system where she did not want it gone. She even told it, like, you have to leave because I will not tell you to leave. And
that breaks my heart. Oh, that's like every movie where it's like you like adopt an injured bird, and it's like, no, you have to go now. You have to go.
Yeah, and it's like, but no, and with Bob, luckily it told him that too. It's like, I would go, but she won't let me go. And so there was like a really slowing down of like helping her connect to my self energy. And a really big thing that she wanted, but she really resisted, was she's like, I don't want to hate it. And I was, you don't have to hate it, but I had to get a lot of my other parts that really didn't like it to give space so that I could sit with her and grieve and really understand. It's like kind of you know, we can have such different relationships with people. You know, I think in people's lives, like there's people that can be so brutal to so many people, but then like, you know, they turn around and they've got this one person that like, they're just their world, and they've got this like beautiful, loving connection. And so for her, she needed to grieve that, and she needed to understand how it really, really did protect her, even though it was, you know, it's like a parent who like drugs help them, so they give their kids drugs because they think that'll be like the thing that'll help. And yeah, I don't know what the question was at, but noticing just the complexity of the UBs and the work.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you naming the notion of different parts of a person's nervous system. They will hold different views on things, and that's completely normal. That is par for the course to say, okay, other parts hate this thing, don't like it at all, want to throw it overboard. And she's like, no, I won't be safe, right? And that's such an important thing for people. Just like the UB, when we talk about these beings and they're like, they've forgotten who they are, they don't trust love and compassion and light, but it is there. And once they have that awareness, they're like, oh, I can go home. They won't punish me. They won't judge me. They've actually been waiting for me. And the same thing for her, to be like, if it goes, Kylie's divinity, Kylie's self is actually there and will hold her. She doesn't have to be alone, and she will be protected.
Yeah. And what really helped actually was my dad and my grandparents came in, and my dad died when I was younger, which is what left her very vulnerable as well. And so he came in really quick, and he's kind of like a guide now. So that was like, there was just like a wall of support, of energy. Like it's very different now, you know, and my energy really had to be the one that like pulled her, you know, or helped her out of that space. But there was so much more support. And I find working with UBs is sometimes we pull in guides and ancestors to like, they just have such a huge, massive self energy that they can really help in that work.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you naming that. It's not just the individual self, but the whole team of support. Yeah, it's beautiful. And again, you know, you're gonna have some, perhaps many listeners that are skeptical about all that how they view it. They're, you know, in our culture, it's fantasy, it's wish fulfillment, it's the stuff like the Western academic history. Yeah, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. I have other questions that are coming to mind, but I don't want to prematurely depart.
And I tell people, like, you don't have to believe it. And even when I, like, you know, I do workshops on IFS, and I always teach about UBs. I fit it in wherever I can. And I say, you don't have to pay attention to this. You don't have to, but if you run into one, you're going to really want to know what to do. Or if you have one inside, you're going to want to know your options. And so just you don't have to, but if you come across something like this, at least you have a process. There's something that you can do about it, or else you're going to get really, really stuck. Yeah.
So, okay. So I want to pivot here a little bit to, as fascinating as UBs are, and again, we're using the IFS terminology, but entity, unwell ancestor, you know, not exact. The way you described them at the beginning is they're parts that are not a part of you. These other autonomous beings, just like parts are autonomous beings, and even that freaks people out. Like, you know, that's the whole grieving process of the captain, right? The captain who, like when you were talking about the Kylie's therapist part, she is Kylie. She's definitely up there in the CEO boardroom, you know.
Definitely the CEO.
Yeah. And that can be a grieving process once that part is like, wait, I'm not the unified
she had a
Robin.
mental breakdown in level 1 for sure. She definitely, that was really, really hard for her to realize she wasn't self.
Yeah. I don't know if I've denied that grieving process for myself. So actually, boy, I'm a little scattered here because I'm like, I still haven't named the fact that how did you and I come into contact with one another? So this is the bridge there is like, okay, I don't know if I've done that grieving process in my own system. If there's like, just like, it's all hypothetical, even though the majority of me has allowed me to buy in to the depths of the strange stuff that other IFS professionals are like, what? That's weird. What was I saying about that? So when I journal, I came across like a panel. See, I spent like almost 3 decades in the deserts of atheism. And so I came across like 5. They were funny too, because they're atheist parts existing on like a celestial like boardroom desk or whatever, like embodied as Neil deGrasse Tyson and what's his name, Richard Dawkins, and these atheists, famous atheists. Anyway, so but I referenced journaling, and so how I came into contact with you was taking the going to one of the conference, this most recent IFS annual conference, and you were a presenter there, and your workshop was on journaling, like parts journaling. And I definitely want to give some room in our conversation for the value of that, how that can be an important resource. So when people are doing this work, if you're in therapy, you're working with a professional, you're working with someone who knows what they're doing, who they can hold a safe container, and they're also lending their self energy, that loving, non-judgmental presence, all that stuff. You know what I'm talking about. And you can also build trust in your system outside of your therapy hour, like on your own. So I'm inviting you to talk about the benefits and the utility and the potential that is unlocked through journaling and parts mapping and all that.
Yeah, I think journaling, some people, they might just pick it up really quickly. For other people, it's going to be quite difficult. I know with my system, it took a couple years before my parts would listen to me on my own. I really needed I just needed somebody else. Like I remember, like I would meet like peers. I'd be like, I just need to sit here and like offer yourself energy. And then I just need this. I just need this to go. And then eventually my parts were like, no, it was just like this message, we'll let you be with us now. And I had like Word documents and I'm like writing, and it just seemed so messy. And so I was like, I'm going to create an IFS parts journal. And so I wrote and published that in about 6 months, I think, maybe even less, very quick. But what I wanted was something to like, I treat the check-in sheet like my therapist. And because what happens also is you have their self-energy, but they're also holding it for you. Like they're asking the questions. So your analytical parts can give a bit of space, and they're holding that information. So I was like, okay, if I have a page that kind of walks me through that and like holds the information, I can just keep checking in to see how do I feel towards what's on the page. And that's because, again, it's not about so much, to me anyways, and other people are different. Sometimes it's really good to just like really get all the information out and witness. But to me, it's really building that relationship and that connection. So as I look at the page and the parts that are on the page, like, how do I feel towards them? How open is my heart to them? Can you feel that? What do you want me to like? What do you want to share with me? And then I can write it down, and then I can really check in. How am I relating to that? Does that make sense? And then can you feel that? So I use the page to like hold the system so I can have a relationship to it.
Yeah. The page. Go ahead. Yeah.
And then it's, again, therapy is also expensive. And so now when my parts would allow me to sit with some things, it's like I could keep the things that were like really tough for me, the parts that were like, nope, we're not allowing you to, we're not opening that door. But what really helped me sometimes is my 2 big polarizations. It's gotten a lot better now, but used to be work really, really hard and then shut down. And so it was like my hyper productivity parts would go, and then I wouldn't be able to do anything for like a day, just be like out, stare at a wall. And so I would sit with those 2 parts to be like, so that they could get to know each other better, and I could like negotiate my day better so that there wasn't such a drastic up and down. So it's really helped with sitting with like polarized parts to just help them have that space to both be heard. Neither one's right, neither one's wrong. But if you don't give them that space, sometimes it feels a little, for me anyways, like whiplash a little bit, depending on who's taking over. So, and with my clients, it has really helped solidify the work as well, to sit with parts in between, to be able to track parts better. I can't remember my sessions usually after if I don't write something down. I think that's it's like trying to remember a dream. Like, that was so amazing, that dream. I'm gonna like tell everybody. And then like a couple days later, like, no, a couple hours of the dream, no idea. It can really, I think, deepen the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I to your point about therapy is expensive, that's kind of why I want to give more attention to the utility of that, is that people listening, who everyone's on their own healing journey. And you know, I just speaking for me, I have some part that like you know, like completely was disparaging of journaling. Like, I'm not keeping a journal, like, you know. And so there's still that remnants in my system. It's no longer at the point where it dominates. I now see the value in it. Not only just that, but like to the point where I do have a Word doc, or not Word, it's Google Doc, right? And I just recline in my chair and I press the dictation button, and I'll just say Robin : you know, and then say what Robin is, that's what self is asking, and then if it new line, and then the part, and then if it's a new part that comes in, new part : and I'll just but it's having that space. Like you say, you're exactly right. I mean, you have an amazing dream that evaporates like the morning dew so quickly. So to session, and so to have a place to, the word is externalize, or a word is to externalize this stuff out of the mind, put it on a document, put it on something that your conscious mind, your system can reference and interact with and build upon. I even, when I was out of time, I was like, I gotta go pick my girls up from school. I was telling the parts, like, I'll be back. I will follow the transcript to guide my way back to you, you know? And also, that doesn't presume that it'll just be that neat and clean, right? Like,
we could have an intention, might not be able to get back there.
Say that again?
We can have the intention, but it doesn't mean we might be able to get back there again.
That's right. Intention. It's like, here's a map. It may or may not happen. And that being flexible is key. It's so key. So you wrote that in 6 months, and you wrote it as a because you knew it was so useful for you. You published it. It's, people can go grab it. We'll have a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to get it. But that's what you were talking to the people who were at the workshop, at the conference, the annual conference, about the utility of that. And what was your relationship with journaling like when you were in elementary school? When did you start to journal?
I journaled when I was really young. I actually really enjoyed journaling. And then my mom read my journal, and I got in a lot of trouble, and it caused a lot of shame. And so I didn't journal for a long time. And then when I became a teenager, I journaled again. And then one of my friends went and read my journal, and then got really upset at me. So then I didn't journal again for a while. So I feel like it's always been in me to like want. And then there's just been, you know, major betrayal. And one of the beautiful things about IFS journaling is nobody could read it, for me anyways, because it's just words. There's absolutely like it makes sense to me, but a lot of times the words I'm putting down, sometimes, especially in the one that I have, there's not a lot of space. So it's really just like fears, like where you feel in your body, we want me to know. And then there's like one page that is like more sharing. But yeah, one part's like this. Sure, look at my journal. You'll never be able to decipher what's in here. Anxiety 5, like growth. It's just like words.
And I get a part that's up and gets really I don't want to say indignant, but just kind of like how can people be so? Another part's like, you're naive. To this part that's like, it reacts to your mom reading your journal or your friend reading. I mean, it's like, I know, like I was socialized as a little kid, like, don't go into a lady's purse. like don't ever go into a lady's purse.
Don't go into somebody's journal.
Right. It's the same principle. Like if you stumble across something, you don't do that. That's a no. That's a no. I mean, what a betrayal.
Like, or don't tell them. Like if I get it, like if I was a parent, I could see the draw. Like I could see it. Like what's going on. I want to know. But it's such a, you know, that's something that probably could have really helped me when I was younger, and then it was taken away. And so yeah, don't read people's journals. It's
Yeah.
it's a lot of a mess.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you, in your externalizing process, do you ever, I think, is there a place to draw? Not all of this is linguistic, but is there a
Mhm.
place in your journal where people can, it's like, I want to draw the vision that I'm being given rather than like write it down?
I do. It's not a big space, but it is a little space. On the first side of it is like a draw your part, and then at the bottom as well is like two spaces, two little places to draw your parts. And sometimes mine just look like stick figures, but sometimes I just want to again like externalize this like ball of energy or something. And then what I also have is a little square that says the gallery. And
Mhm.
so when I'm working with a part and as it's sharing, I can sometimes hear like, oh, there's a part that wants to change this one. There's a part that's frustrated this one. There's a part that's annoyed with this one. I can like feel them slightly popping up in my subconscious. So I'll be like, can you just sit in the gallery? And so I write them there so that they're remembered,
Yes.
instead of me just asking them to step back. And then at the end, I can check in with the gallery. Is everybody good? And then it's also a way to like track parts, because sometimes people are like, what are parts? I did a whole workshop once on parts, and then at the very end, somebody was like, "What is a part?" I think they emailed it to me, and I was like, "Oh no, that would have been good in the beginning." So, in the gallery is a way that you can like track other parts too, that you could like sit down and journal with. That like, oh yeah, I remember when I was working with this, there was all those parts that popped up, and got other parts you can work with.
Yeah. I'm associating to a client of mine from years ago that was like, Robin, there's too many parts. Right? Like,
Yeah.
right. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. Like the gallery is this, it's a, I don't want to use the word capture, but it does record it. Like it honors, it acknowledges. It's like,
Mhm.
you exist, you're here.
Mhm.
And by the way, like I feel like my system would be like kind of overly respectful, like to a detriment, like radically about like, is it okay if I put you in the gallery? Like rather than just doing it. I really, because I actually, when Bob did, you said you watched that session. I had forgotten that I put
Mhm.
that up. My
Mhm.
first session, like and I've been in therapy for 5 years, psychodynamic
Mhm.
therapy. And then I worked with an
Mhm.
IFS professional, and bless her heart, she was really good at befriending protectors,
Mhm.
knowing to get that first pickle out. And I worked
Mhm.
with Bob,
Mhm.
and how he got to my little scared 8-year-old guy
Mhm.
was he said, "We won't dig you out."
Mhm.
That line, I
Mhm.
kind of make that line my own when I'm
Mhm.
with people, to say like,
Mhm.
let it know we're not
Mhm.
going to shine a spotlight on it. It can come
Mhm.
forward if it's ready or not. It gets
Mhm.
to choose.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but I love that gallery, because it's like, yeah, in this process, it's not just like, oh, there's another obscuration, or there's another
Yeah.
hindrance. Move it along,
Yeah.
like out of the way,
Yeah.
off the checkerboard, you. Like it's like, no, here's a
Yeah.
pop. Who knows what kind of future relationship you'll build with it? Humble
Mhm.
ourselves. We don't know what it's going to be. It could be one of the most shiny pieces of gold ever in your whole life as Kylie Feller, or not.
Yeah.
But for now,
Yeah.
we're just going to put it in the gallery.
No.
Pray.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
I find, and because they want to watch too sometimes, and
Oh yeah.
so I do find it as like an honoring, like I do want to track you. You are important, and there is a moment when I'm putting them in the gallery, I'm also validating them.
Yeah.
Like, yes, that absolutely makes sense. Would you mind sitting here? And so and even when I work with people, new people, I'll be like, you know what, when we go inside, I'm gonna ask a lot of your parts to step back. And I want them to know I'm not, I appreciate them. I want to hear from them. They can always say no to me, but sometimes we just need to focus on one area, or else it gets really, we can't get anything done. But I want them to know, because if I use that direct access sometimes in the beginning, because I was noticing parts were getting really offended when we go inside, and I'm like, but that part, mind stepping back. But like, you just meet me and now you want me to leave.
Yeah.
And so I'll sometimes be like, please say no if that doesn't land well or it doesn't feel right. I do want to hear.
I love that, front loading the respect. Be like, this is before we do anything. It's almost like ground rules, even though you're not imposing rules, but you're like,
Mhm.
just understand that it's all coming from this place. And then whatever parts are present and can take that in.
Mhm.
I love it. It gives you more, because let me finish that sentence. It gives you more efficiency,
Mhm.
with the system. Because I mean, I know exactly what you mean about, otherwise we will just spend months and years, like however long, with parts diverting. I mean, Bob calls my like a whack-a-mole or a chess master, all sorts of nicknames for parts that are real good at sleight of hand. Look at this thing over here, so we don't have to go to that shameful, scary thing, right?
And so I think like respect is like if the more respect you show the parts, and like they've worked so hard, each one of them are so important. And giving a little bit of that psychoeducation, I think, if they need that, like, this is why I'm asking you to do this. It can really, it's like we're all on board, we're all doing this together, we all want the same thing, and I think that goes a long way with the system.
I want to ask you, Kylie, about spirituality in general. You're like I talked about how I was raised a Christian Episcopalian. I can't, forgive me if you had mentioned this already, but what's been your spiritual or religious background, your parents, or if you feel open to sharing that?
Yeah, like my grandparents were quite religious. Well, they searched for something. They bounced around a lot of religions. So
right?
I really didn't take it in a lot when I was younger. I remember living with my grandparents when I was really young, and like girls weren't allowed to wear pants. So for a while we just had to wear like skirts or dresses, and I'm like, sure, whatever. And it's because they jumped into so many different kind of churches and religions, a lot of them being like a Christian Catholic kind of faith. And so I grew up, they also had they have an art music school. So I grew up doing like the music for church as well. So I was quite into it when I was younger, but I remember when I was about maybe 11 or 12, I was like a youth group, and they were talking about how other religions are bad because they make objects sacred or something like that. And I was like, well, it doesn't really make sense, because we have like the rosary and we've got like, Jesus up here, and we have to like kneel, and like that doesn't totally make sense, because we also have our objects that are spiritual. So like, why are we attacking them for this? And then one of the people, I asked them if my dad was in heaven. My dad died when I was younger, and they're like, well, if he was bad, then he's in hell. And I was just like, I'm out. And I like quit I was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested in this. And I think I've always I didn't stop believing in God or Jesus, but the church, I didn't really feel super welcomed at, or some of the teachings just didn't make sense when I started to challenge it, I think, as I turned into a teenager. And then coming to Thailand, it's a Buddhist culture. I really loved like that part of it. I would define myself as being spiritual, not religious, but I don't know. But I can't really define it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it also makes so much sense to me the moment someone's like, well, if your dad is bad, he's in hell. And you're like, I'm out. That's like when people talk about like, well, dogs aren't in heaven. You're like, I'm out. Like there's all these things where it's like, I don't like, even like the littlest kid is like, oh, I know that's not for me.
Yeah. And it breaks my heart working with clients that did grow up in the church, where they did internalize a lot of the messaging and the shame. And I'm really grateful my system didn't pull in that we are all bad and unworthy. I'm glad I just somehow, got caught in the music. I love singing songs. I didn't really listen to anything else. But working with clients, that messaging is really hard if that gets in and that gets absorbed, that like we're all bad or we're all sinful, and we have to like somehow make up for that throughout life. And I've seen it create a lot of fear around what self energy is too, because it's like self kind of feels like God's energy, and then God's going to come in and punish me. And so I've had to do a lot of rewriting in people's systems of that, like God's not going to punish you. And even with some clients, we've brought God in. So if they've really got things like that, it's like, well, what if we just asked God if he's going to punish you, or he thinks that you're bad? And whether or not that's what's really happening, but every time we have, it has been a really, really beautiful, reassuring experience that absolutely not. They're not judged. They're not bad.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hard to find the word. So I mean, you and I right now, it's 9:49 a.m. on the Eastern. I'm in ordinary consciousness right now. You're gonna, after this interview, I imagine it's wind down time or whatever. It's late. You're in ordinary
Yeah.
consciousness, but those experiences feel like a shift into non-ordinary consciousness, so powerful that it's kind of like the mystical experience questionnaire that what's his face, he's passed away now. He's a big time researcher at Johns Hopkins. I always forget his name.
I remember it, but I know the questionnaire. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like, quantifying the mystical, like, like, and the things that, why did I even associate to that? Just that they're ineffable. It's hard to, it's like, oh, and undeniable. So it's like, I can't really put it into words, but I'll try. And then also, no doubt, it felt like obviously so self-evident, right?
Yeah, I think it becomes embodied in that state. So I can tell the client that no, God does not judge you for that. Or, even working with younger parts that like their parents hated them. We can invite in their true self energy, or, bring in ancestors, and I can say it to them. But when you bring in that energy, there is an instant shift. It is undeniable. It's not just intellectually understood. There is a full shift. And that's the one thing I love about IFS is it's not just intellectual, and that's where I lived a lot of my life, is I get to feel it. I get to know it. And so even with a lot of the stuff we've talked about today, UBs or ancestors, or, bringing in God, or like bringing in Buddha, like have a conversation, you don't have to believe it. And I wouldn't blame you for not believing it, but it's really quite different when you actually get to experience it.
Yes, it's so I'm associating to a Christian phrase of taste and see, right? Like you have to taste for yourself if you really want to see this. And I'm also associating to I've been listening to the Telepathy Tapes podcast. I don't know if you've heard of that or checked it out, but one of the things that I can't remember her last name. She's the host. Like, it's a documentary on kids with autism who are non-speakers and possess many spiritual gifts. It's quite fascinating. If you haven't listened to it, definitely up your alley, Kylie.
Yeah, write it down.
Yeah. But she kind of says, because the stuff that's described in the podcast is so unbelievable. She kind of reminds people at the end. She's like, remember, a true skeptic keeps an open mind.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't believe this without evidence. It's like, okay, fair enough. You want to come into the cave and collect some evidence? Like,
come on in.
Okay, well, that's okay. There's no judgment. What if we were to set up kind of like a monitor, like where you're in a safe place and you can watch what we do as we go into the cave? Well, what about that? Yeah. Okay, so hold on. So yeah, to circle back to just complete that thought, that experience that one has being held and being loved is so powerful. From me, I can only speak from my own experience. Well, I have watched this happen in people as well. That the love is so powerful that the human nervous system seemingly cannot help but just pour and release tears, tears of relief, tears of grief. Who knows what the tears are? There's too many words. But this response that you see is the tears. I remember when I did there was a ketamine retreat just for IFS professionals. So like we're 6 people, masks, weighted blankets, noise canceling headphones, all trained in IFS. Now we're going to get jabbed with 75 milligrams of the ketamine molecule and have an experience, right? And being IFS professionals, we also knew the protocol of preparatory sessions, finding parts that, who was the part that signed the consent work to do this retreat?
That are like, nope.
Yeah. Who are the parts that are like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm scared. Yeah, that happened the first time. My blood pressure. They did they checked my blood pressure. Like, Robin, we can't dose you yet. We got to let that. And I'm like, oh no, I thought I got every part. But the second time I did it, I had that love and that message that, again, you don't need a molecule You can get that in other ways,
Mhm.
but once you taste it, it
Mhm.
becomes familiar again. You're like, oh, I know what this is. And it's like the message is like, you and all of your loved ones and all the strangers in the community that you don't know, they're all protected, they're all loved, and it's all going to
Mhm.
be okay for all of you. Like that kind of like global
Mhm.
reassurance. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not just like, yes, of course that's true. Of course that's true. But it's
Yeah.
like the power of that. It's like my eye mask is like drenched in tears,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. Beautiful.
yeah. Anyway, I could ramble on and on and on, but I want to
Mhm.
come back to spirituality and get
Mhm.
when did you, Kylie, when were you introduced to the concept of Akashic? I keep saying Akashic. I don't know what the right pronunciation is.
It could be either. I am horrible at pronouncing things.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm like this. I will brutalize pronunciations. But it was my friends had taken it and they wanted to practice. I booked a session with them, and my one friend did an IFS session. And I was like, excuse me, how did you just do an IFS session? And she's like, oh, your master's teachers and loved ones told me to. And I was like, God damn it, now I'm gonna have to take this training. I'm like, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was like, and the person I took it with, Amy Robison, she does a lot of parts work in the Akashic work that she does. And so there was that similarity there of like connecting with your emotional body, connecting with your spiritual body, having a conversation with it. And so I was like, you know what? I was just had started taking starting IFS training, and I was like, I'm just going to take this. And I also, because they worked with entities too, so I was like, okay, if I take this, this is going to give me like a more confidence in the spiritual side of IFS, and so I took it, and I had skeptical parts for it, and I still have them sometimes that like hang around, but there is something I can access that space without opening up people's records. But I gotta say, every time I open up, before I open up somebody's records, I have this one part that's like, what if nothing happens? And like one part's like, literally, I'll just give them back their money. It'll be fine. And then I kind of like calms it down. Like if nothing happens, it's like, okay. And every time it's just, it blows me away sometimes. And like the access to like ancestors, there's a lot of like past life work that comes through. And it also made me a lot more comfortable when I'm in somebody's session and they're giving an opportunity for a past life. I can like kind of see it, and I can be like, okay, let's go through this door here that they're offering. So it just like opened up all of these doors. And yeah, like I've opened up some people's set like Akashic records, especially I work with Indigenous people sometimes here in Canada, and their ancestors are so powerful. They come through so strongly in the Akashic work for just the most beautiful like messages. I've had one client's ancestors just tell me to shut up and just literally like, shut up, we've got this.
And you obliged.
Yeah, I was like,
wisely.
absolutely, thank you. Like, because I'm trying to guide, like, what do they want you to share? Like, what do they want to share with you? Trying to like hold the session, and they're like, just stop. And it's something that like that client wouldn't ever say to me either. So and what I do, and I open up, everybody's a little different, Akashic coaches, but I do it kind of like an IFS style where like you have the experience. I'm not a psychic, I'm not a channeler like a lot of other Akashic coaches. They'll channel information and share it with you. You have the experience. So when I open up the records, rather than me guiding it though, they guide it. So I open it up and then I check in, and they'll often start with like an image or like a direction. And I'll be like, there's a path behind you, or there's a door, or I'm just seeing this image. Let me know when you see it. And then they'll like, walk down the path. Let me know when somebody meets you. And so they really have that experience. But with the IFS training, if we run into a past life, I know the steps to help heal that part, or how to develop a self to part with something that's showing up that might be a little scary, or, so I can help build that connection. But the beings that I meet in the Akash that are around people are very, very powerful, and it's a very cool experience.
So we should I appreciate everything you're saying, and I'm mindful that part of me is like, hold on, pause her, and for people who don't know what this is, let's define it, right? Like what is it? Right now, so because I have a very cursory understanding of it. I took, once you've worked with Bob Falconer, or you're on his like email list, you'll get you get like workshops or other events, or and it's like, oh, that's interesting, and then that just opens you up to like, so here are these tuning forks, and your memory is in your magnetic field, not in the hippocampus, and you're like, whoa, what the fuck, right? so all that stuff, I have a cursory understanding of it, but so for those who don't know, what the hell is an Akashic record? What is the Akash, or the Akashic field, or what is this to the uninitiated? What is this?
Yeah, and honestly, I haven't even dove that deep into it myself. I take the training and I do the process, but the basic understanding is that, and the Akash is actually mentioned in like holy books. It's the Book of Life, is I think a translation of it, and so it's this place where kind of your soul exists, and all the stories, all of its history, and around your kind of soul's history are your masters, teachers, and loved ones. Sometimes your higher self, your ancestors, your guides, these other beings, but basically your existence, your soul's existence. And so when you open up the Akash, you're kind of like tapping into this space. And so when I say I don't lead, I kind of like, I guide people through an exercise where they give me permission to open up their records. And I open up the records asking permission from like their masters, teachers, and loved ones to guide them on like whatever they need, or if they have an intention, I ask for that support. I do a lot of like cleansing of my energy before that to make sure it's like really like clean, that we're really protected. And then there's just they guide, and so there'll just be a message that comes through, and so I'm helping, but I'm not the one leading the session. And so it's your masters, your teachers, your loved ones that are gonna guide that, and I help kind of hold the space. First, if I'm doing IFS, I'm guiding it more, unless all of a sudden we end up in a space that's similar to the Akash, where guides are coming through and ancestors, and then I really again take a backseat and pull into their wisdom and their guidance and their information. I think Bob says something like that, when like ancestors or guides show up, I like somebody smarter than me in the room, and like lean into that. So IFS work, I think, really wanders into there, but the Akash, it just goes a little bit deeper, is what I find, into whatever that dimension, whatever that place is.
Yeah. So to kind of help support and to translate, just for some listeners, I'll speak for my understanding is, just imagine that the structure of being, whatever you want to call it, the universe, the cosmos, and any and all dimensions, seen and unseen, just everything, right? The alpha, the omega, everything. Imagine that's actually, there's a library. So we could talk about Akashic records. It's like records mean there's actually a knowing and a holding and a storing of everything. And it's like everything. It's like everything. Like, what about the little piece of like crusty thing on my chapstick? Yep, if that's relevant, if that's needed, yes. Right. It's like everything. Like, why? So then critical or empiricist parts are like, what? So again, to your point, if you can welcome any skeptical parts, like that's insane. Like, what a fun thought experiment, but that's not real. Welcome all of that. And if you just keep the open mind and imagine, so Kylie was talking about opening. So I don't want you to necessarily like teach people how to do this right now. I don't know if that's ethical or not, but the point is there's a process to open, to say, all right, this is the intention. We're going to go to this library. We're going to go to this place. And why? And I'm going to ask you, what are people, when people book an appointment with you to work and gain access to Akashic records, with the, you could say, knowledge or presumption that, look, you have a soul, and that soul has existed longer than the name that's on your birth certificate, right? I was born in 1984 and I go by Robin Smith. Well, my soul is much older than that and has been through much more shit. We want to talk about like the early childhood trauma of Robin. It's like, guess what? It went through stuff before that, right? So there's a place where you can go, and not only is the soul there, but you said masters, teachers, loved ones. So you'd say your ancestors, your relatives, and beings that are responsible for your soul's journey So when you guide them to open this space up, what are some common intentions? Why is someone who's shopping for an Akashic Records coach, what are the common reasons? Yeah.
I think, it reminds me of like, why go on an ayahuasca retreat? What pulls you there? I think most people are like, I don't know why I'm here, but I'm here. Or like, I need healing. I need something. Something's missing. Something's happening. Something. And so a lot of people come with no intention other than to see they've been called. Something's on the other side of the door. And I tell people, like, same with ayahuasca, if you've got a pull, like lots of people don't have a pull, but if you have a pull, go see what's calling you from behind that door. And, and so sometimes we go across, and a lot of it, I think, is like a remembering of who we are. And sometimes pieces of us have gotten stuck in previous lifetimes with certain like beliefs, promises, betrayals, hurts, something that is somehow, you'll see it show up in this lifetime too, that there is this theme that keeps replaying. And so I think sometimes we open that door to go back to where's the root of that keeps playing out in this life. It's like past life regression is a big part of it. I got a lot of, I believed in past life regression, and then I signed up to do a past life regression therapy session with somebody once, and it was again that like very visceral, like there was no denying that was me in my life. Like I was like, that was me. It was so visceral. And there is a lot, in that past life session, she comes up in my sessions as well too. There's a deep, deep connection between my past life and my present life. And so you can do it with IFS. I often will do very similar sessions, just this through IFS, but the Akash, when you open it, it's like, here we go. It's like usually very much a spiritual experience where you might cross it in IFS. The Akash is like, we're right here. And again, I think you're just sometimes called. I need to open that door. Something's there.
Yeah. See, my parts of my system are like, whoa, why wouldn't we? Like, if that's available, it's really like, it's kind of like I don't know this. I'm constructing this analogy on the fly here, but it's like, if there's like my desk is, here's why it's not on the fly. My desk is messy. It's like, okay, if my messy, and there's a book I can go check out at the library, how to organize your desk. Like, why wouldn't I go do that? It's available. And then, and if I've been told that, hey, once your desk is organized, like things just flow a lot better. Like your mood's better, your like efficiency better, all things in life just spring and flourish. And it's like, so just look at, and we have, and the library's right there. It's like, it's available to anyone. And so at the soul level, just the idea of like doing talk therapy, and that's very appealing to me. For people who are also skeptical about past life stuff, they're like, you mean like what the Hindus subscribe to? I don't know how this book came onto my. I have a Google Doc, and there's like books I want to read. I don't know how it got there, Kylie. There's a book. I wish I could know till I could thank them. The book, Brian Weiss's Many Lives, Many Masters book.
Yeah.
I listened to that and I'm like, oh shit, that's a thing, right? Because I would have been the IFS professional that once that past life potential opening showed itself, I wouldn't have I wouldn't be able to handle it, right? Not handle, but I wouldn't be as helpful and open, right? And so for people who don't know that, when Kylie says it's undeniable, that notion of when you're in a hypnotic trance and you are encountering something from the past, it's just very obvious. Like we like, I'm Robin right now, but 400 years ago, I could have been some gal who felt betrayed by her grandson or whatever. Like, who knows? And then in that life, it was, hey, my grandson betrayed me. But in this life, it's like, my mom or my wife or whatever, right? But you go back. I'll just use an artificial example here. I know my wife's energy. I know her energy. So in that trance, it's like I go back to another lifetime and I look that person in the eye and I'm like, oh, that's Kelly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, it's undeniably Kelly. I know.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but she's a business partner in this life. What the hell, right? Like, so
Mhm.
what's going on? So the souls, it boggles the rational mind. It really does.
It does. And I have skeptical parts. Like, and that's the one thing I love about this is like, experience it. Like, I don't like, just, and even though when I've experienced it, sometimes my parts are still like, like, I know it for myself, but sometimes guiding other people, it'll be like, but what if nothing happens for them? then what, but it's never happened yet. So
Never happened.
it's never happened yet. So, but I love, I love that these things you get to viscerally feel. Like, I was so frustrated when I was younger of all like the books and the theories that like talk about these like nice things and like live their true self and authentic and like like living and thriving. And I was like, but like, how do we get there? Like, what are the steps? Like what? And that wasn't until I found like IFS or like some of these more like spiritual modalities or somatic practices that I'm like, oh, I want to embody it. Like, I want to feel it for myself. Like, don't tell me about it. I want it. And so when people come, like, yeah, bring it, but like, do you give us enough trust to give it a try?
Yeah. So you said your friend, you were like, how does she know how to do IFS? And she said your masters and teachers, or was it her masters and
No,
teachers?
mine, because yours are the ones that guide it, right? So when I open up, like if I open up your records, it's going to be your master's teachers and the ones guiding the session. So that's how she kind of did it. And when I took the training, I could see there was some parts work included into the thing, but I feel like it was like the universe conspiring another way to get me to do something that I was really meant to do. Yeah. So that was the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this. So I want to pivot here to sharing. You also have an insight timer track, Kylie. More than one. You have more than one track. But so you have an insight timer profile. And for those who don't know, insight timer, I think, is the world's largest collection of guided meditations. On all the apps that are out there, it's the largest. It's free. They do have a plus or premium version. But so if people want, I'll make sure to put links to that as well. If people want to like check out your guided meditations, they can enjoy them there. I have been using Insight Timer of late with, there's a prayer, and I don't know how I found it, but I found it, and it's an invitation to surrender, and it's like 22 minutes long. And it's 9. I guess this guy who I think he was born in the 1800s, died in 1970 or something. He was contacted by Jesus, and he channeled down Jesus's messages and wrote them down. And so the guided meditation is the 9 different messages that Jesus says. But in between all 9 of them, there's kind of like a, let me role play my relationship to Jesus and say, like, I surrender I give my life to you. Take care, you take care of everything and everyone. And the reason why I'm specifying that it's 9 and that it's 22 minutes from the IFS perspective, it's like, and it's also, I think it's supposed to be done over 9 days in a row. I'm like, yeah, that's what the protective system needs, is like that much persistence and encountering like, oh, is this one not ready to surrender? We'll just stay, we'll stay with it. And once it finally does, you better believe there's a whole other part. There's like, no, I'm not doing it. There's just infinite parts that are like, I'm not surrendering, because the notion of letting go of control, it's like, what do you mean? What do you mean just give it over to someone else? What do you mean trust divine? That's my bank account's going to go empty, or my child's not going to learn the lesson they're supposed to learn, or whatever. Like, and I've just been, that's where I'm at right now, of like, kind of in a formal way, sitting down and doing that prayer every day over and over again. But then it's like, what are we going to do for dinner? Like, right? Like, just the most boring ass like thing is like, okay, can I, the thing that I want, I guess, to convey here for people is like, when the human ego complex and the rational analytical mind is trying to problem solve and figure and sort it out and all that stuff, it's almost impossible to get access to guidance, bigger beings that are wiser than us. I'm not saying it's impossible, because I'm open to anything, but it seems to be the case that it just doesn't get through the static radio noise. And so people have to, if they want to get access to something smarter than them, obviously that requires some humility, but they have to love and make space for and acknowledge all of the tried and true parts that have been running their life, and say, hey, you know, what if I love the experiment language. What if we ran an experiment here? And they get to say no. My parts often do. They're like, no, like, let's order Papa John's or like put something in the oven. You know, it's but it's very reassuring to my system to know that if I can calm down, there's other stuff there. And again, I told you, that's when you spend 30 years in atheism, there's a lot of conditioning, you know, and parts to work through. But so this is a ramble way to get to, when did you get inspired to start to share your work on Insight Timer and like writing guided meditations? When did that start for you, Kylie?
Yeah, I have to go look back at it, but I think some of my first ones, I think I got inspired. I took my yoga nidra training. That was another one I came across, which felt a lot like IFS, but like how to get into some of those spaces without like somebody guiding you. You can really get, I think, into a state of connecting with what feels like kind of like self energy at the end, as you kind of, yoga nidra, it translates into sleep yoga, and so people know. And it's really nice because it's not like a regular meditation where you have to like really hold your focus. That if you focus a little in the beginning, it'll take you on, it'll just kind of pull your system into it. And so it goes through 5 layers called like the koshas. So it'll move you through like a body. Well, first you set like an intention in your heart, something that kind of like manifesting a little bit, but not really. It's just like something that you wish for, you want, but you state it as if it's already happened. And then it moves you through, it's called a sankalpa. Yeah. Sankalpa. And then you move through the body. So there's a body scan that you do. And then you move through the energetic body, which is often breath. And then you move into pairs of opposites. So it's again, that kind of working with polarity, which so many of us get stuck. Can we feel these two opposite things with equanimity, with like curiosity, without attaching a label? And then can we feel them at the same time? And then we move into the imagination body. And so that's where I found I could link IFS in. So sometimes I'll just be like images that you imagine, but sometimes it'll be like, okay, there's a path, you know, or there's, an ancestor is coming, or there's a part of you that you want to communicate with, or has something it wants to share with you. So being able to kind of tap into this kind of sacred space to connect with parts or to offer healing. And I think the one I have on there is with, it was a long time ago that I did it, but an inner child. And then at the end of that, you move into like oneness, where like everything just kind of starts to dissolve, but it's not in like a nothing. There's something there that feels very interconnected and really nice. You're no longer separate from everything. You're connected to everything. And so I really love that practice. So that's what got me onto Insight Timer. So I was like, okay, I've got to use this skill. And how could I use this skill is to create them, record them, and then put them out.
Okay. So you found a yoga nidra practice on Insight Timer. Is that what you?
Well, my same friend that did the Akashic record training also did a yoga nidra training. And I was like, I don't know how I was just, well, I think I have a love-hate relationship with yoga. It's something that has also really helped me heal. There are parts that really resisted. And when I asked those parts actually why they resisted so much, they were afraid of the trauma that I'd find stored in my body.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And then I asked them, what would you like to be doing if like it was okay, like if I wouldn't get overwhelmed by trauma in my body? And they're like, oh, we'd love to be doing yoga. I was like, okay, that's funny. But when you do yoga and you lay on the mat and like sometimes I'm like, I just wish I could just stay here for like the whole class. Like this just feels like the most comfortable. And then you're like, oh God, now I gotta move. And then it feels amazing again at the end, and you're like laying there and you're like, oh, I just wish I could stay there. And that's yoga nidra. It's like you could just lay on your mat and it takes you on a journey. And so I think that's what pulled me in, was like, I got something. I do yoga every day. I just don't move.
Yeah. Well, is it corpse pose? Someone told me once, they were like, Robin, can you guess the most difficult yoga pose? And I was like, eagle pose, or something that requires like a lot of flexibility.
Flamingo.
And she's like corpse pose, or she was saying like, what do people in my class have the toughest time with? And I was like, eagle pose. And she's like, no, corpse pose, just laying still, just laying.
Yeah.
Because that's back to the surrender, right?
Yeah.
It's the surrender. It's the conscious surrender. It's like, you know, I imagine if someone's asking themselves to do that, they're like, there's a part of them that's like, I fucking gotta itch my nose right now. Like, am I allowed to do that? Or do I have to like stay radically still, just like in some Buddhist practices of become entirely still, you know?
It is I became a yoga teacher too, because I did yoga so much. So I did that. And then I used to teach. You could always see the people. Well, I would see who had really high anxiety, because there's no way they could stay still for that shavasana. You could just see the people who like could not do that pose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kylie, I know we're running low on time here. Before we close up, is there anything that we haven't talked about that might be, you know, even tangentially related to some of the material we've been talking about? I know I could continue finding the questions, but I want to be respectful of our time, and also give space to name things that you want to let listeners know. I mentioned a couple of times about putting links in the show notes, but you have offerings on Insight Timer, your website, but even before we get to the promo stuff, is there anything else that is important or a message that you want to give to our audience?
Yeah, I think this conversation has been so fun. I feel like all the topics we've talked about, we could dive so much deeper into each one. So, if any of this excites you, there is so many avenues to kind of go deeper into it. I absolutely love sharing some of the things that have like changed my life and my journey. So really appreciate this space and you creating this platform to share this with people. So
yeah, well, it's my pleasure. I knew it would be fun too, and it's literally just the time boundary. I mean, I'm like, I've got all day, but it's the day is over for you. I don't want to be the culprit of your bad sleep. So where can people? Are you active on social media? Do you have newsletters, website? Where can people learn more?
Yeah, I've got a website. It's just my name, so KylieFeller.com. I've talked about my journal that's available on Amazon, whatever country you're in. It's also on Etsy in a digital format. I offer IFS trainings for any professional. So for counselors, for coaches, for anybody that feels like knowing IFS would help them in their career or even just their life. I teach those only with, they're 40 hours long with 3 participants. So we're practicing the model every time that we meet. It's really tailored to where you are. I've had some people that have done like stepping stones or other experiential trainings, but still it's a complex model, and having somebody there to like help guide you every, like your particular areas of like growth, or to really support you in those areas that you're really passionate about and want to go deeper into. So with the 3 participants, I can really tailor that training to whatever needs you have, whatever population you're kind of working with as well. So if anybody's interested in taking an IFS training, feel free to reach out. Because it's small participants, I can really, again, tailor some of the timetables to working times for people. I've done like evening ones, sometimes on the weekends, sometimes really early in the morning. Just finished teaching one for the UK and Australia because I was over in Thailand. And I do workshops as well. I just did a direct access boot camp. That's always explicit direct access is always a difficult one sometimes for people. So
I'm gonna raise my hand and say, I want to take that. I want to take it, Kylie.
yeah, and it's really fun, because you get together, you get to practice it, and you get the opportunity to meet one of your parts in a more deeper way as well in it, and kind of consultation questions. So I'm going to start offering that one, I think, a little bit more regularly, because I think people get like so much out of it, learning and personally, just to get to connect with your parts. I've got some courses online on advanced unburdening. Also has a demo of me working with an unattached burden in that demo, and working with ancestors as well. I have one that goes over the 6Fs and introducing IFS to clients, and also through the healing steps. And those come with multiple demos of the work that I've done to help with that work. And it gives you access to a monthly live call with me with the purchase of any of those courses, where any questions you have about IFS or the learning, way to connect. So
you're busy. You got a lot of offerings here. So people can register for those trainings on your website. That's where they can register.
Yeah, if you go to my website, it's got all of it on there. I've got parts that are pushing ahead with helping people to learn kind of the IFS model personally. I also have like an IFS journaling course, if kind of similar to what I presented at the conference, but goes a little bit deeper as well. So for personal development of your own IFS practice and professional development of IFS skills.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if you were a teacher in past lives as well. Right.
Yeah, I actually is where I get a lot of joy. I sat with it for a while, and I was like, I always thought I wanted to teach actually at like universities or colleges. That was like my goal. And then I did teach at a college last year for counselors, like a counseling diploma. And the first semester was the best thing ever. It was great. There was a lot of interpersonal drama, which was kind of difficult to handle, but they all loved IFS, which was great. And then the second semester was hell. I've never been more triggered and more activated in my life.
I believe it.
But what it was a catalyst for me to launch these courses, because I told my parts, if you don't launch your own courses, we're going back to the college.
They were like, we'll do whatever it takes.
So I was like, so I've been wanting to do it for a while. And so like the first semester too, and like the people from that class were amazing. They actually came to like an in-person thing in Nelson. They like flew in and like drove in to meet me there. And like it was cool to get to reach people that might never get access to like IFS, that were like new counselors. And so that felt amazing. But I don't work well, I think, in structures where people tell me what to do and what I can't do. Mm-hmm. Just know that about some of my parts.
Hence the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah. So it was a catalyst. But yeah, for sure. I think I actually can't even remember my dreams, because in all of my dreams I'm teaching. And so it drives me crazy. So I actually like have a part that I'm like, I don't want to remember my dreams, because it feels like work.
Right. They're like, we need space from work. Right.
Yeah, like this has got to stop. But it is something I'm super passionate about. Sometimes the reason I'm in Thailand too is because I can get caught up in work. So if I come to a place like this, it brings that balance into my life.
Right. Slow you down, all the self-care stuff. I mean, heck, $8 massage or whatever it is that you said, like that's great. I remember when we were in Bali, we were like, oh my gosh, the massages are so cheap. Let's do it. Like I actually put like my foot in one of those places where like the fish come and eat the skin off your feet. I was like, I never would have imagined I'd be doing this stuff. Anyway, I digress. You're active. I know you have an Instagram. Are you active anywhere else on social media?
I have my Instagram. I am on Facebook. It's very similar to like what I post on Instagram. I would love to start making TikToks. That's like possibly coming.
Right.
There will be more TikToks. I am on there, but mostly Instagram, and then we'll just share that content on other platforms.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, so much fun chatting with you. Great to meet you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Robin. It was really, really great to connect.